Hey up guys, it's the Yorkshire Pudding. I'm going to give you some tips that help me through the Colluseum, because if I can do it, you can too. This video assumes you've already watched a guide and know the basic mechanics, as I'm focusing more on specific tips and advice that may help you get over the finish line. I managed to take down Sol Heredit himself on the first attempt, but this was by no means my first time facing Sol Heredit. Just to clarify, I mean first time after reaching Sol, not the first time in the Colluseum. My first tip is to absolutely smash the Sol Heredit simulator. It's possibly one of the hardest bosses in the game and it does take some learning. This is why the simulator is so important. There's no use in getting all the way through the waves just to die at the final boss because you've not practiced it. This is how I managed to kill him on my first kill after all, saving me a load of extra pain and stress. And hopefully you can do the same too. Many of you will already be doing this, but if not, this is the most important tip. My second tip is to consider using Microsoft Edge as the browser when using the simulator. When I used Firefox, the fight would be extremely laggy, and it made it a lot harder to learn. And when I switched to Edge, it was a lot smoother. Looking it up online, a few others had the same issue. So if it's slow, try using a different web browser. And no, I'm not being paid by Microsoft to say this, I promise. My third tip is to consider which affixes will make Sol Heredit more difficult, not just the waves themselves, especially if you're struggling with Sol. For example, Red Flag will not make Sol Heredit any more difficult, but can make, in some cases, the regular waves more difficult. But ultimately, there's an element of RNG involved as well. But also, don't just take YouTubers' advice on the best ones to take. Try them for yourself, as you may be surprised that an affix you were told was hard was actually manageable for you, and one that you were told to take you may actually find difficult, or it may not align with your character's equipment build. For me, many said to avoid Solar Flare, but I didn't find the Solar Flare 1 affix to be too bad, and I actually found myself getting to the higher waves more consistently when taking it. I also decided to avoid at all costs the affix that reduced my defense and increased enemy damage, as I opted for the tank build. I'll get into this build more later. If I could have selected the perfect set of affixes to get through the 12 waves, it would have looked completely different to the affixes I actually ended up with the attempt I got my Quiver. Sometimes you get unlucky, and maybe it's worth restarting if you're only on wave 2 or 3 if the RNG has been bad, but at the later waves there's a good chance you'll be dealt a bad hand of cards at least once. So my fourth tip is, don't let it get you down. On wave 11 I had to take the affix where my armour is reduced and I took more damage. For my setup this is one of the worst I could have taken, but I didn't really have a choice. As a tank build this sort of nullified the main strength I had. If I would have exited the game at this point however, I would not have got my Quiver. The chances of you getting the perfect setup of affixes is extremely low. Accept that. And unless it's an extremely bad combination and you're still in the mid to lower waves, just take it on the chin and move on. My fifth tip is don't always be tempted by the riches. Many times I was doing fairly decent, had good affixes but decided to take the loot after getting a few onyx drops and the prize pot was looking pretty healthy. I said to myself, if I die now I'll sacrifice my 600k prize pot and incur a 500k death fee on top. I'll be 1.1 million worse off. Now don't get me wrong, this did save me money, but you've got to consider a few things. One should practice the Colluseum a lot and are now making real attempts to get your Quiver. Every time you leave you're basically failing an attempt. If you had a decent set of affixes and your supplies are strong, you're now forfeiting an attempt that could have been your Quiver. And let's face it, a Quiver's worth more to you than 1.1 million coins. What I'd recommend is, yes, cash in out when you're still learning, until you find the waves up to the wave you usually cash out on have become relatively easy. Then keep increasing the level past the waves you're now comfortable with. But then, when you're ready to attempt to get to Sol Heredit, unless you've burnt through a load of supplies and your affixes have been super unlucky, just press on and only cash out if you're lucky enough to get a rare item drop along the way. Save money by cashing out when you first start off, maybe, but then when you're making those real attempts, just go for it. You may burn through a lot of supplies at wave 6 and think it's all over, but the next few waves you may not use any supplies at all, except for maybe a couple of sips of Sanfew. At least you're now gaining experience on them high levels. And ultimately, if you die, so what? Even if you die 100 times but finally kill Sol Heredit, you've only spent 50 mil for the best in-slot range cape in the entire game. Now that's a bargain if you ask me. When I first started this channel at the start of the year, I set myself a goal of 100 subscribers by the end of the year. But before long I thought, why not make it 365? One for every day of the year. Well, we managed to smash that target and then I set myself a goal of 1,000 subscribers. And you know what guys? We've managed to smash that target too. So now I'm setting myself a goal of 1 million subscribers by the end of the year. Nah, jokes aside guys, I really appreciate all the support from you. I read all the comments and I'd like to thank you guys for the likes and subscribes as well. Let's see if we can push 2,000 by the end of 2025. Now on with the rest of the video. Tip 6, this is a short one, and maybe I'm the only one in the entire game who's made this mistake, but make sure you're starting at the correct pillar. I genuinely thought I started at the pillar just to the left where you spawned in. Yeah, it's not. It took me 7 deaths to figure this out, so I had to include a tip in this video. Considering I died 19 times before getting my quiver, this was a long time to be a smooth brain. Yeah, so if you get the wrong pillar, it'll mess up your spawns and all the guides you watch online just won't really work. The NPCs won't get trapped the same way, and the reinforcement spawns will be brutal. Make sure you start in at this one over here. Please comment if you've had the same issue, just to make me feel a little better. If you haven't made this mistake, then just pretend you did, for me. Tip 7, my equipment build. I went with a relatively simple setup, with as few switches as possible to maximise my supplies. I brought Justiciar to make me super tanky against range and melee attacks, meaning that if I get into trouble I can pray mage and hide behind cover with my bulwark equipped. You're not invincible by any means, but it should help rescue you from a sticky situation until you regain your composure. The downsides of this setup is that you lack the range capabilities and more offensive melee attacks. If you're just here to get your first quiver, then I'd recommend giving this setup a go. You're not going to beat any speedrunning records, but it can help you get your first quiver. I use the Noxious Halberg as I don't have the scythe. Just make sure you take the affix Myopia at least once before the final boss, as you'll need to keep attacking the boss between each dodge. If you don't take Myopia, your halberd will remain a 2-tile hit weapon and mess the whole thing up. The good thing about this setup though is Myopia is your best friend. If it comes up, take it, and take it 3 times. My ring is the Ring of Suffering Eye for defense. Amulet of Blood Fury for extra heals, I'd highly recommend this. Echo Boots for boots, Infernal Cape, but of course a Fire Cape will do too. Rada's Blessing 4 for the prayer, and Barrow's Gloves for the extra defensive stats, though Ferocious Gloves are fine too. Some prefer the Light Bearer over the Ring of Suffering, but I'm not as much of a fan of this for my method. I'll explain why a bit later. I brought a Bowfer and a Sanguinesti Staff for the Fremenix, a Saradomin Godsword for health and prayer restoration, and of course the Bulwark for emergencies, set to block. Some people keep it on attack and keep swapping between the Bulwark and the primary weapon. For me, doing this whilst prayer flicking adds that extra complexity, and I don't think it's necessary. Each to their own though. I found 1 prayer renewal was enough, and 4 super combat potions. I may have gotten away with 3, I just happened to bring 4. It's your choice. Then take 8 Sanfews, not super restores, just in case you have to take the Lion affix that makes them poison you, and the rest is Saradomin Brews. Tip 8, Patience. I selected the Ring of Suffering over the Light Bearer because the Ring of Suffering provides you with defensive stats plus the Ring of Recoil effect, and the Light Bearer does not. Yes, the Light Bearer restores your special attack faster, and this means you can use your Saradomin Godsword special attack more frequently. But the Ring of Suffering means that you get hit less often, and could mean the difference between life and death. As for your special attack replenishment, when you're behind a pillar, why don't you just do this? Load up the Sol Heredit simulator, have a bash at the boss on that, then when you wipe or kill him, go back from behind the pillar which you were hid behind like a coward, use your special attack, go back behind the pillar again and rinse and repeat. There you go, you've saved yourself a ring slot which can be used for an item with defensive stats and a recoil effect. Of course, take the Light Bearer if you desire. There's no hard set rules, this is just what I prefer. It takes longer, yes, but I'm using this time to practice Sol Heredit, which paid off big time when I finally reached him. I'm not suggesting doing this in the first few waves by the way, at least get to the harder waves first or you'll be there all day. Tip 9. At the end of each wave, make sure you reach the starting tile here. If you fail to do this, then you'll have to get back to the starting tile whilst counting the ticks after pressing the start next round button and then clicking back behind the starting pillar on the same game tick as you usually do. If you do this correctly, the round should start like it usually does. When coming to the end of the round, I like to pull enemies closer to the starting tile to ensure there's enough time to get there. Now you won't be able to move when the affix screen comes up, but what you can do is swap around equipment and drink supplies. Make sure you take advantage of this, especially if a difficult round is approaching. Sometimes if I'm doing well on supplies and I'm about to start a hard round, I like to overheal, restore up and super combat potion up, just so I'm ready for what's about to come. Tip 10. To finish off with a few tips for Sol Heredit himself. I never bothered learning the L method. For me it's something that forces you into certain parts of the arena that I didn't usually want to be in, especially if there's obstacles in the way. I just learned the mechanics the regular way, and this is coming from a guy who's recommending the use of Justiciar throughout the Colosseum. If you do the Sol Heredit simulator enough times, his moves will become second nature and moving around the arena whilst dodging will be a lot easier, especially if you have things like the healing totem spawning in on you if you took that affix. Make sure to turn sounds on. Part of your instincts you develop are not just animation but audible. The audio cues may even play a larger subconscious role than the visible cues themselves. Remember, you're looking all around your screen during the fight, there's floor hazards everywhere, you're clicking on your inventory, your protection prayers for his triple attack, your equipment tab for his equipment swipe attack, you're dodging and attacking him constantly. You've got enough to look at. Let your ears take some of the mental load. On the topic of Sol Heredit, keybind your equipment tab for this one attack. At first I hated this mechanic, but after practicing it, I loved it when I used it. It was like a free attack by the end of it. Don't bother timing it for your first kill, just click it. If you time it too late and it hits you, you'll definitely feel it in the morning. For the triple attack, download the Runelight plugin Metronome. I had this on for the entire fight. Again, this audio cue plays a big part in correctly blocking his attack. Use this for the simulator too. Another quick tip is when you have to heal or use supplies during a fight, try and only sip one dose of potion per attack he does. Getting a bit greedy and trying to sip too many sips at once may result in you getting hit by the boss. So just try to stick to one sip to remain in the flow of the fight. And that's it for the Colosseum tips. These helped me get my first quiver and hopefully they'll help you get yours too. It's more achievable than you may think, and there's no requirement to use any particular gear setup. So if you've tried the others and they haven't worked for you, why not give this one a try? Anyway, that's it for now guys, and until next time, I'll see you later.